Dearest viewer, I pose to thee a question. What in the shamalama ding dong is a blue blood? That is apparently a super controversial topic, and we're going to talk about it here in just a second. First off, before I do, if you haven't liked the video or subscribed to the channel, please go ahead and do so. Something like 85% of you are not subscribed yet, and if you did subscribe, it would just mean the world to us. We really enjoy doing this, just hanging out, talking some football, talking some trash and all that to Ohio State fans who seem to have trouble keeping up. I'm just saying. But if you don't mind doing that, that would really mean a lot to us. And yeah, this blue blood conversation seems to really be stirring the pot lately. So I figured why not just release an entire video for the sole purpose of pissing off a whole bunch of Ohio State fans. Because by the definition that I'm about to lay out, is Ohio State a blue blood? I don't know. I don't know. But now that we've got you hooked, let's talk about it. What is a blue blood? A blue blood, as defined by the Oxford Dictionary, is noble birth, or a person of noble birth. For instance, blue blood is no guarantee of any particular merit, competence, or expertise. It is merely just a person of actual noble birth. It originated in the early 19th century, so 1800s, after Spanish sangre azul, perhaps alluding to the blue appearance of the veins of people with fair skin as compared with those of people with darker or tan skin. Ah, there you go. That makes sense, because blood actually appears blue in your veins because it hasn't been oxidized yet. The only reason it turns red when you start bleeding is because of oxygen interacting with your blood. Science. The reason I bring this up is because we got this comment, and I don't know if I should say the name of this particular person, but there it is. Oh, whatever. If you have kids, I apologize. Satan's Shart. Dude, why? But okay. Satan's Shart commented on our live stream. Average G, I don't know. Average 4.4 losses a year for 25 years now. Outside of 3 cheating years being only relevant years is an insult to blue bloods. You have one more win in 25 years than Wisconsin, even with the help of a Stallions. A Stallions, not just the Stallions, a Stallions. So really, we could just get any Stallions, and we would have been totally fine. We didn't need the Stallions. We just needed a Stallions. That's not blue blood material. That's also not how you define blue blood, is it? Because we know a blue blood is someone who is born of noble heritage. So I decided to dive in a little bit more into this blue blood conversation because I want to provide a definitive answer as to whether or not Michigan is a blue blood and why Ohio State is not a blue blood. And the latter is purely just to piss off Ohio State fans. I'm just going to level with you. I am doing some grade A trolling in this video, and it's going to be glorious. So I looked up some blue blood information, and here's what we've got. In college football, a blue blood is more than just a successful team. It's a program woven into the fabric of sports history. These schools are revered for their decades of dominance, iconic traditions, and cultural impact. Think royalty, but with shoulder pads. Oh, co-pilot, you make me laugh. What makes a program a blue blood? Here are the key ingredients. Sustained success across eras, multiple national championships, especially spread across different decades and coaching regimes. Oh, interesting. All right, maybe Michigan's in some trouble here. Elite win totals and consistency. No, never mind. Regular 10-win seasons and high all-time winning percentages. Heisman Trophy winners and NFL talent. Well, they got the latter anyway. A legacy of producing elite players and All-Americans. Well, they got that too. They've got a lot of All-Americans. Massive fan base and cultural relevance. Yeah. Stadiums packed every Saturday, iconic uniforms, and national brand recognition. You know, I was on a flight to India randomly one time. Not for any particular reason. It's just sometimes I go to India just to hang out. And a guy on the plane actually stopped me because he saw my hat. He saw the Block M. Not this one. It was a different hat because they hadn't won the national title at that point. And he said, "Hey, Michigan, right?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he goes, "Crazy." And that was the end of the conversation. But the fact that the conversation happened means that this Block M has wide appeal. Historic rivalries and bowl game prestige, participation in major bowl games and rivalries that define college football lore. So this is kind of the interesting thing here. Bo Schembechler took Michigan to several Rose Bowls. Okay, say that 5 times fast. Didn't win a whole lot of them. He was sub 500 in bowl games, period. But they went to a lot of them. So participation in major bowl games. The first ever Rose Bowl, can't remember when it was off the top of my head, but Michigan destroyed Stanford so badly that they actually canceled the game for like the next 20 years or something like that. So yeah, I think Michigan checks all these off. I'd say probably. Sustained success across multiple eras. Does Ohio State check that off? Does John Cooper ring a bell with anybody? Nah, he was still moderately successful. He just didn't have a good record against Michigan. Generally accepted blue bloods. You got Alabama. That makes sense. Thank you, Nick Saban and Bear Bryant. Ohio State, Michigan, Notre Dame, Oklahoma, USC, Nebraska, and Texas. And people are going to argue, first off, that Michigan's not a blue blood, but that's mainly Ohio State fans that don't know what else to talk about. And they're wrong because Michigan has an elite win total. They're the winningest football program in all of college football. Notre Dame, I believe, is somewhere up there as well. And then Ohio State, I think you're talking number 1, 2, and 3 in terms of win percentage between those three. So that makes sense. Alabama should be a blue blood at this point just simply because of Bear Bryant and then what Nick Saban did. Although Nick Saban, that's one era. So maybe not. The interesting thing here, though, is that some sources include Penn State, Florida State, Georgia, and LSU as borderline or emerging blue bloods. That's interesting because Penn State did fine before they came to the Big Ten, but once they got to the Big Ten, they really haven't been doing so hot. They had the one in 2016. I can't remember when they won the Big Ten before. Yeah, I can't remember off the top of my head, but they really haven't been doing so hot. So is Penn State a blue blood? I don't know. And then the fun debate here, can you lose blue blood status? Well, yes and no. Programs like Nebraska and Miami haven't been nationally dominant in recent years, but their legacy still earns them a seat at the table. Although others argue that sustained irrelevance can tarnish the crown. So Miami, I think, has a better argument for blue blood status in recent years than Nebraska. Although now that I say that, I think about like Bo Pelini. Bo Pelini honestly didn't do that poorly at Nebraska. He just couldn't win, the Big Ten. And so they sacked him for it. And why they did that was really stupid because, then they went into several years of mediocrity at that, or barely even mediocre at some points. So it's an interesting conversation, this whole blue blood thing, but how has the conversation about blue bloods evolved in the modern day college football game? Because this is the point. You'd think of a lot of the Ohio State fans that were saying Michigan's no longer a blue blood started saying that, especially around the Rich Rod and Brady Hoke eras. By 2014, they're all like, Michigan's not blue blood. What have they won? They haven't won a natty since the freaking Civil War. No, World War II. That's the other one. And that's not the point. The national championship was not a measuring stick of whether or not you're a blue blood. It's how often do you win football games and how recognizable is your brand to the world. Ohio State is recognizable. USC, Notre Dame, Alabama, Michigan are all very recognizable brands. Frankly, Princeton and Rutgers and then the University of Chicago actually back in the day would have been considered blue bloods. And if Princeton was D1, they'd probably still be considered a blue blood because they had a really good team back in the day. And if they had sustained that, then they would be an FBS and probably just as recognizable as your Michigans, as your Ohio States. And I'm not saying that, Princeton, yeah, they should be considered a blue blood now because if this, and this happened, they would be just as good as Michigan and Ohio State. I'm not necessarily saying that's the case. I'm just saying that at that point in time, your Princetons, Chicago, Rutgers had the brand recognition that Michigan, Ohio State, Alabama, USC, and Notre Dame have now, and Texas. Rutgers obviously has that a little bit over Princeton and Chicago, literally because Princeton's like D3 and Chicago's team doesn't really exist anymore, I don't think, or they're like D4 or 5, I don't know, whatever. At least Rutgers is still playing at the D1 level, although should they be? I don't know. But how do we define blue bloods in the modern college football game? How much time do I have? I'm at 10 minutes. Okay, so we'll wrap this up in just a second here. Traditionally, the definition was about legacy and dominance, generational success, iconic coaches and players, the cultural imprint, you get it. The modern evolution is where performance meets perception, so recent dominance matters. Georgia's back-to-back titles in the 2020s pushed them into blue blood conversations. Now, if we're going by the former definition, though, that's not sustained success over multiple eras or decades. That's just a couple of back-to-back titles. That's a blip in the history of college football, but it's recent, and recency bias exists. Now, I'm not saying that means Georgia shouldn't be considered for blue blood status. I'm just saying it's an interesting conversation to have. Brand power and recruiting. A place like Oregon with the Nike backing and the elite facilities, they're often called something like a green blood, a rising power not yet cemented in tradition, and that's probably because Oregon still doesn't have a national championship, which is kind of wild. I mean, even Michigan State has a national championship, and they suck. And pretty much have always sucked. If you want to talk about one team that is definitively not a blue blood, it's Michigan State. And I'm not even trying to hate. They had 2 good decades of football. They had the 1950s where they won actually like 2 or 3 natties in the decade. And then they had the Mark D'Antonio era, which the best they did was make the playoffs once, and they got blanked by Alabama. So if that tells you anything, it tells you Michigan State is definitively not a blue blood. They are as much a blue blood as Eastern Michigan. Playoff relevance. Teams like Clemson and Florida State gain prestige through consistent playoff appearances and national titles. I mean, yeah, definitely when, who was the quarterback at Florida State that said Jameis Winston, he said a whole bunch of crap he shouldn't have. When he was at Florida State and they kept showing up in the playoffs, and then Clemson kept showing up in the playoffs. Yeah, in the modern game, you start to kind of have these conversations. Are they now earning blue blood status? Again, it's weird because it's just kind of a blip in all of college football. So some analysts now argue that sustained excellence in the modern era can earn a program blue blood status even without historical or deep historical roots. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. Because you can't really change the definition of a word, but the definition seems pretty subjective in this particular case anyway. I mean, literally, blue blood was supposed to be for royalty, not, whether or not we consider, Michigan or Ohio State college football royalty. I mean, that's a very subjective term. A fascinating take, though. So one fan suggested that a school becomes a blue blood when 3 living generations recognize it as elite during their formative years. That means programs like Oregon or LSU could be viewed as blue bloods by Gen Alpha, even if older fans disagree. Yeah, so the younger you are, so that's actually really interesting. That's like a firm measurement that we could use to measure blue blood status by. If you are a blue blood, back in when the boomers were growing up, back when Gen X was growing up, and then, the millennials growing up, and now, Gen Z, if you have 3 sustained generations of success, which Michigan absolutely does, you are a blue blood. I like that because it confirms my narrative, and I appreciate when things do that. That also means Ohio State's a blue blood, which I don't love, but whatever. The debate today, there's now a spectrum. Legacy blue bloods being Alabama, Ohio State, Michigan, Notre Dame, USC, Oklahoma. Modern contenders being Georgia, Clemson, Florida State, LSU, Oregon, and then the fallen giants. I think you can probably guess who's on this list. I'm so sorry, Miami and Nebraska. You have my love and respect, but you're kind of falling out of the blue blood conversation. So, sorry. And I think we're going to go ahead and leave it right there. So who do you think is a blue blood? First off, is Michigan a blue blood, or aren't they, and why? Do you agree with the legacy blue blood, modern contenders, and fallen giants list? Why or why not? Let me know your thoughts in the comments section. Go ahead, like and subscribe to the video. Don't forget to join us Wednesday nights, 8:30 p.m. for our live stream, and we will catch you in the next video.